Hi, my name is Marina Hutchins. I am currently a PhD student, and today I'll be presenting over some work that's part of my thesis titled Somebody's Watching Me, where I've been exploring the effects of social information use in production. So the social environment is composed of conspecifics that engage in social behaviors and can communicate information with each other through the exchange of signals. Researchers have long studied animal communication, but typically in a dyadic or a pairwise context. However, communication isn't restricted just to pairwise interactions. So social behaviors such as aggression, mating, are often occurring within this larger social context than just the two individuals that are engaged in an interaction. Thus, social information that's produced as a result of two interacting individuals is actually available to any other individual that's within the range of signal transmission. So instead of just limiting our viewpoint to social interactions that occur between pairs of individuals, we can actually expand our lens to realize that animal communication and social information often involves signalers, receivers, and eavesdroppers. So these third-party curious conspecifics may be able to detect and intercept signals from the social interactions that they observe. This social information that they might be extracting might be related to future mates, altruistic tendencies, fighting abilities, and it can help that eavesdropper to navigate their own social environment and to make better decisions in the future. However, the very presence of an eavesdropper can also influence the interactions of the signaling of pair. This is through a well-known phenomenon titled the audience effect. So the demonstrating pair might actually change their own behavior because an eavesdropper is watching in order to best benefit themselves. So importantly, these two phenomenon aren't isolated events, and they shouldn't be studied irrespective of each other as they often are. As you see together, they actually generate this feedback loop where the behaviors of one individual influences the behaviors and the decisions of another. Additionally, if we further complicate this and think about individual differences or genotypic variation in any part of this feedback loop, this would introduce new selection pressures, new costs, and new benefits. So for example, for eavesdroppers, the sex, the genetic background, or even the social experience of that eavesdropper might cause two individuals who observe the same social information to react differently to it. So when we incorporate all of these complexities about how social information might be produced and used by eavesdroppers of different sexes and genotypes, we can better understand how social behaviors, how animal communication, and ultimately how social information itself can evolve and persist in populations. So this brings me to two of my research questions focused on social information production and use. The first being, how does the present, sex, and the genotype of an eavesdropper actually influence the production of social signals? And secondly, how do animals actually use social information to then make those decisions on how to navigate their social environment? So aggressive contests are one type of social behavior that's been well studied in the dyadic context. However, we know less about the influence of the social environment on aggression or how individuals actually react to observing aggressive contests. So the experiment I'm going to be sharing with you guys all today is one to specifically test if and how signals from aggressive interactions might be used as a form of social information. So my study system, Drosophila melanogaster, is what I've been using to tackle these questions on social information. There's a few reasons that make them a really great study system for these questions. The first being that they form social groups on their food sources, which provides plenty of opportunities for curious conspecifics to observe interactions between others. Secondly, the aggressive behaviors of male flies, some shown in this short clip, have been well characterized, making flies a really great study system for looking at aggression. And finally, we know that flies possess the cognitive capabilities that are required for social information use. So this image is from a paper titled Cultural Flies, where researchers were able to show that a female fruit fly was able to remember and to copy the mate choice of another female. So in order to answer these questions about social information use and production, I needed an arena where I can allow an eavesdropper first to observe an interaction between two fighting males so that I can test for social information use, and then to be able to easily be inserted into that arena to then interact with those males. So that I can test social information production, right, with the eavesdropper watching the fight. And then insert the eavesdropper into the arena to test social information use to see how they use that information to interact with the two males. So this is the arena that I designed. Here's a quick cartoon mock-up of the arena where the large blue circle represents the Petri dish arena and the small red circle represents the pipette tip that's perched on top. So for my experimental protocol, I inserted an eavesdropper fly into the pipette tip and then put 2 male demonstrator flies into the large Petri dish arena. After a short acclimation period, I allowed these 2 demonstrator males to engage in an aggressive contest, during which I recorded 5 different types of aggressive behaviors. And during this contest, the eavesdropper was able to intercept auditory, visual, and olfactory cues from these 2 demonstrator males. Then after that 30-minute period, I was able to easily remove the pipette tip on top of the arena and add that eavesdropper fly directly into the arena with the 2 interacting males, the 2 demonstrator males, to then see how they use that information to choose who to interact with. So I'm bringing back my feedback loop to talk about the 3 different experimental treatments I did as part of this protocol. So the first treatment I did was the female eavesdropper treatment. So for that, I had a female fly as the eavesdropper. So for the first half of the experiment, I got to test the social information production in the 2 male demonstrator flies to see how they behaved when a female was watching them. And then for the second half of the experiment, I inserted that female fly into the arena with the 2 demonstrator males. And I recorded the mate choice of this female. So then I was able to see how the female eavesdropper fly actually used the social information from the aggressive contest to make a mate choice decision. I did a similar protocol for the male eavesdroppers. So again, there was a male fly inserted into the pipette tip for the first half of the experiment. And then for the second half of the experiment, when I inserted that male eavesdropper fly into the arena, I recorded all of the aggressive interactions that that male fly either performed or received with the 2 demonstrator flies. And then my final treatment was a no eavesdropper treatment. So for the first half of this experiment, I just let the 2 male demonstrator flies fight without an audience present. This sort of gave me a baseline for how those 2 demonstrator males behaved when no one was watching them. And then for the second half of the experiment, I actually inserted into the arena a fly that didn't have any prior social information. So I didn't allow them to watch the fight in the first half of the experiment. And so then again, this sort of gave me a baseline for how I might expect those flies to behave when they weren't able to have access to social information. So now I can show you guys a little bit of data from this experiment. So I'm popping my research question back up because first we're going to talk about data that resulted from the social information production side of the experiment. So that first half of the experiment. So we conducted generalized linear mixed models in order to ask these questions about social information and aggression. And our model actually revealed that there were significant differences in total aggression of the demonstrator males, depending on the identity of the eavesdropper. So we have a box plot here with my 3 treatments on the x-axis and total aggression of the demonstrator males, which was just the sum of their aggressive behaviors on the y-axis. And the red dots here simply represents the means. So specifically, we saw that the presence of a male eavesdropper actually suppressed aggression in those demonstrator males. What we didn't find in this model was any evidence that the genotype of the eavesdropper significantly predicted these differences in demonstrator male aggression. So then I have 2 sets of results from the social information use side of the experiment to show you. The first with the female data and secondly with the male data. So starting off with the females, I actually found that access to social information altered female mating patterns. So in this graph on my x-axis, I have the 2 treatments, whether the female had access to social information or not. And on the y-axis is just the percentage of trials when the female chose to mate with one of the 2 demonstrator males. So this difference was significant, so that females that had social information were more likely to mate with one of the males. What I didn't find here was that aggression actually predicted these female mating decisions. So surprisingly, females weren't more likely to mate with either the winner or the loser of the contest. Additionally, we didn't find any significant genotypic differences in how females use social information. Then for the males, we found that social information did modify male aggressive behavior as well. So I found that the total aggression of the demonstrator males in the first half of the experiment significantly predicted the male eavesdropper aggression in the second half of the experiment. So specifically, we saw that those male eavesdroppers, they scaled or they matched their own aggression based on how much aggression they witnessed from the two demonstrator males. So that the more aggressive that these demonstrator males were, the more aggressive the eavesdroppers were when they got the chance to enter into the arena for the second half of the experiment. For the males without social information, so those males who didn't get to watch the fight, no such relationship existed. So they didn't match their behavior to the fight of the two demonstrator males before they got the chance to enter the arena. We also found that genotypes differed in how they responded to social information. So in this interaction plot, I have the two treatments on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, just that measure of male aggression. So these lines just show how aggressive each of these three tested genotypes were when they were allowed to interact with the demonstrator males. So some genotypes sort of acted the same, whether they had access to social information or not, whereas others like genotype A were far more plastic in their responses to social information. So these genotypic differences were shown to be significant based on the model that we constructed. So I'm bringing back this feedback loop to again talk about how this experiment confirmed that this relationship between social information use and production was significant. So again, to highlight my results, the male eavesdroppers caused a decrease in demonstrator male aggression. And on the social information use side, we actually saw that male eavesdroppers, they conformed, their own aggression to match that of the intensity of the contest that they had just observed. So together, these results show us that the demonstrator males may have been able to avoid elevated aggression from male eavesdroppers by adjusting their own signaling behaviors. We're also seeing a complementary story arise in the female data. So on the social information production side, we observed that female eavesdroppers didn't elicit any changes in demonstrator male aggression. And on the social information use side, we didn't see any evidence that female eavesdropper used aggression in order to choose a mate. Again, by looking at these two processes together, this makes sense that the demonstrator males didn't adjust their aggressive signaling behaviors when a female was present if females weren't actually utilizing that information in order to choose a mate. So I have two big takeaways from the project I want to leave you with. So the first is that social context matters. So it's likely that eavesdroppers have actually shaped the evolution of animal communication and social information use. So when we fail to consider or think about the social environment of communication, we ignore a major source of selection, and this restricts our understanding of communication and social information use and production. Secondly, these two traits are linked processes. So this finding just emphasizes the importance of considering how these two social information use and production actually work together in tandem to influence the transmission of social information. So these results have been really exciting for me so far, and they have fueled two new avenues for research that I'm currently working on. One is a set of follow-up experiments to better investigate how those female eavesdroppers use social information to make decisions. So we're varying the traits of the male eavesdroppers, of the males that she observes, in order to better understand how and when the females choose to rely on social information to make a mate choice decision. And additionally, those results that I showed you guys that the male eavesdroppers actually showed genotypic variation in social information use. It's driven us to ask about genetic variation in both of these traits and to investigate the genotypic correlation between these two. If we're able to do that, we're going to be able to better understand if and how these two traits are linked. And then that might lead to a better understanding of what can drive reliance on social information cues in a population. So really excited about these current directions. If this is interesting to you, or if you want to ask me more questions about it, I would love to hear it. But for now, I need to say thank you to my lab. I'd like to present my land acknowledgement and say thank you to my funding sources of the NSF and Animal Behavior Society. And I'd be happy to take any questions.